Sometimes the smallest lie becomes the beginning of the greatest truth you'll ever live. The first time I realized Liam Brooks wasn't invincible, he wasn't standing in front of a room full of clients or smiling through another family barbecue with my older brother. He was standing outside my apartment on a quiet Friday morning, gripping a paper coffee cup so tightly that the cardboard had started to crease beneath his fingers. Until that moment, I had always thought of him as the man who had everything figured out. Liam was Mason's best friend long before I understood what friendship even meant. Growing up, he was the familiar face who showed up for birthdays, backyard cookouts, and every holiday dinner our family ever hosted. While Mason was always loud enough to fill a room, Liam carried a quieter kind of confidence. He listened more than he spoke. He remembered the little things other people forgot. Somehow, despite the 8 years between us, he had never treated me like an annoying little brother tagging along. Years changed almost everything. Mason built a career several states away. Liam became one of the most respected interior designers in Boston. I buried myself in architecture school until graduation arrived faster than I was ready for. We saw each other less often, but whenever our paths crossed, conversation always felt effortless, as though no time had passed at all. That was why his unexpected message 3 days earlier had surprised me. Can we talk? Nothing more. Nothing less. Now he stood outside my building, wearing a charcoal jacket over a simple white shirt, looking far more uncertain than I had ever seen him. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything," he said. "I was just pretending to organize my apartment." His eyes drifted toward the window behind me. "Were you succeeding?" "Not even a little." A quiet laugh escaped him. For a brief second, the familiar version of Liam returned. Then it disappeared again. I unlocked my apartment door and motioned for him to come inside. The place was small, cluttered with sketchbooks, drafting tools, and half-finished architectural models spread across every available surface. He looked around before smiling. "It suits you. It needs cleaning. It feels lived in." There was a difference. I offered him coffee. He declined. Instead, he stood beside the window overlooking the street below, unusually silent. "Liam." He nodded slowly without turning around. "I need a favor." I figured as much. "It isn't a normal favor. I don't think you drive across the city for a normal one." His shoulders relaxed just enough to suggest he appreciated the attempt at humor. "My ex is getting married on Sunday." I heard. Mason mentioned it. Months ago. Silence settled between us. Then he finally faced me. "I told people I'd be bringing someone." "A date?" He nodded once. "The problem is." He hesitated. "There isn't one." I waited. I never corrected anyone when they assumed I was seeing someone. "You accidentally invented a boyfriend?" "It wasn't exactly accidental." "What was it?" He looked down for a moment. "Exhaustion." I frowned. I got tired of every conversation becoming about why I was still alone. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. So people filled in the blanks. And I let them. He took a careful breath. "They're all expecting to meet him this weekend." Understanding arrived slowly. Painfully. "Oh." His expression softened with quiet embarrassment. "I know how ridiculous this sounds." I folded my arms. "I haven't even heard the ridiculous part yet." For the first time since arriving, he smiled without forcing it. Then he asked the question that completely changed the direction of my life. "Ethan." His gray eyes met mine with a vulnerability I had never witnessed before. "Would you pretend to be my boyfriend for one weekend?" The apartment suddenly felt much smaller. Outside, traffic continued moving through the city exactly as it always had. Inside, everything became impossibly still. Every sensible thought told me to refuse. Fake relationships belonged in movies. Not in real life. Not with my brother's best friend. Not with the one man I had quietly admired for far longer than I had ever admitted to myself. Yet beneath the awkward request, I saw something I had never associated with Liam Brooks before. He wasn't asking because he wanted to impress anyone. He was asking because, for the first time in his life, he looked like someone who simply didn't want to face an old chapter alone. Before logic could stop me, the answer escaped my lips. "I'll go with you." Neither of us realized it then. The lie had already begun. So had everything that would eventually become true. People say the hardest part of pretending is remembering the lie. They never mention how dangerous it becomes when the lie starts feeling like home. Liam arrived outside my apartment just after sunrise on Saturday. A dark green vintage Range Rover rolled quietly to the curb, polished enough to reflect the pale morning sky. It wasn't the kind of vehicle most successful designers would choose, which somehow made it feel unmistakably like him. Timeless instead of flashy, practical instead of loud. I grabbed my duffel bag and headed downstairs. The moment I stepped outside, Liam walked around the front of the vehicle to meet me. "You packed light. You said we'd only be gone for 2 nights. I did." His gray eyes drifted toward the bag before returning to me. "I appreciate that you actually believed me. I wasn't aware there was another option." A faint smile appeared. "There usually isn't." He opened the passenger door before I could reach it myself. It was such a small gesture that it should have meant nothing. Instead, it reminded me how naturally considerate he had always been. The city slowly disappeared behind us as we followed the highway toward the coastline. Brick buildings gave way to rolling green hills, then stretches of towering pine trees dancing gently beneath an endless blue sky. For nearly 20 minutes, neither of us said much. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It simply carried the weight of everything waiting ahead. Finally, Liam cleared his throat. "We should probably make sure we remember our story. Our fictional relationship." He nodded. "If someone starts asking questions." I leaned back against the seat. "All right. When did we meet?" "You tell me." 8 months ago." "Where?" "An architecture exhibition in Boston." I laughed. "You really planned this?" "I've had months." "That's slightly terrifying." "It probably is." His expression softened with quiet amusement. "You corrected me in front of a scale model." "I did." "You insisted the lighting ruined the entire presentation." "I sound difficult." "You were." He glanced at me for a brief second. "I like that." The confession slipped into the conversation so naturally that I almost forgot it belonged to 2 imaginary people. "What happened next?" "I bought you coffee." "That sounds more believable." "You criticized that too." "I have standards." "So I've noticed." We both laughed. The tension inside the vehicle loosened almost immediately. For the next hour, we continued building a life that had never existed. Our favorite restaurant overlooked the harbor. I supposedly stole fries from his plate. He always ordered dessert, even when claiming he was too full. I left books scattered across his apartment. He pretended to hate it, but secretly liked seeing them there. Every invented memory became richer than the last. By the time we stopped at a small cafe overlooking a quiet lake, even I struggled to separate fiction from possibility. While waiting for our coffee, an elderly cashier smiled brightly at us. "You boys heading somewhere special?" "A wedding," Liam answered. "Yours?" I nearly choked on absolutely nothing. "No," Liam replied with an easy smile. "We're guests." The woman studied us for a moment before nodding approvingly. "Well, you make a beautiful couple." Neither of us corrected her. As we stepped away from the counter, a cool breeze drifted through the open doorway, pushing a loose strand of hair across my forehead. Without thinking, Liam reached over and gently brushed it aside. "There." His fingertips barely touched my temple before falling away. "It was bothering you." The gesture lasted less than a second. Yet my heartbeat completely lost its rhythm. The cashier watched us with unmistakable affection. "I've been married 43 years, she said warmly. "Never stop looking at each other like that." Heat rushed into my face. Liam looked equally caught off guard. Neither of us found an answer. Back inside the Range Rover, the conversation disappeared again. Not because there was nothing left to say, because one simple movement had quietly changed something neither of us knew how to explain. Late that afternoon, the ocean finally appeared beyond the cliffs. White stone buildings overlooked the Atlantic, surrounded by blooming hydrangeas and rows of waving seagrass. The wedding resort waited beneath golden sunlight, elegant enough to belong on the cover of a travel magazine. Liam parked the vehicle but didn't immediately reach for the door. He looked toward me instead. "Ready?" I followed his gaze toward the grand entrance where strangers already gathered outside. I took one slow breath. "No." A tiny smile crossed his face. "Good." I frowned. "Why good?" "Because neither am I." Together, we stepped out of the car. Before we reached the entrance, Liam quietly offered me his hand. This time, I didn't hesitate to take it. The strangest part about pretending wasn't fooling other people. It was watching my own heart forget where the performance ended. The lobby overlooked the Atlantic through towering glass windows that stretched from polished marble floors to cedar-beamed ceilings. Afternoon sunlight spilled across the room, painting warm reflections over elegant furniture and fresh white hydrangeas arranged throughout the entrance. The place felt impossibly beautiful. It also felt impossibly dangerous. Liam's fingers remained intertwined with mine as we crossed the lobby together. His hand was warm, steady, comforting. A smiling woman behind the reception desk looked up immediately. Liam Brooks. He nodded. We've been expecting you. Her eyes shifted toward me. And you must be Ethan. I forced a smile. It's wonderful to finally meet you. Before I could answer, another voice echoed across the lobby. Liam. A tall man in a navy suit hurried toward us with his wife close behind. There you are. Liam greeted him with an easy embrace. Chris. It's been too long. It has. Chris looked at me with obvious curiosity. So this is the mysterious boyfriend we've heard so much about. I almost glanced at Liam. Almost. Instead, I extended my hand. Ethan Carter. It's great to meet you. Chris laughed. Liam never stops talking about you. My eyebrows lifted ever so slightly. He doesn't. Oh, constantly. His wife smiled knowingly. We were beginning to wonder if you actually existed. Liam gave an embarrassed shake of his head. I may have exaggerated. A little. Chris teased. You made him sound perfect. Heat crept into my face. Fortunately, everyone assumed I was blushing because of the compliment. Only Liam noticed the quick glance I sent him. There was an apology hidden inside his expression. Later, after checking into the resort, we discovered another surprise waiting for us. I'm terribly sorry, the concierge explained. There was an unexpected plumbing issue in one of our ocean view suites. Liam frowned politely. I understand. We've upgraded you instead. She handed him a new key card. To our executive suite. That's generous. There is only one small difference. Something in her tone immediately made me nervous. The suite contains one king-sized bed. Silence. I looked at Liam. He looked at me. The concierge smiled apologetically. We can arrange a rollaway bed tomorrow afternoon once another room becomes available. Tomorrow. Not tonight. Liam accepted the key without hesitation. We'll manage. The elevator ride felt significantly longer than it actually was. Neither of us mentioned the sleeping arrangements. Neither of us seemed particularly eager to. When the doors finally opened, the suite exceeded every expectation. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed endless blue water. A stone fireplace overlooked a private terrace. Soft afternoon light filled every corner. And directly in the center of the room stood exactly one enormous bed. Well, I said, that certainly exists. Liam laughed under his breath. I was hoping you'd ignore it. I don't think that's physically possible. He rubbed the back of his neck. I can sleep on the couch. I turned toward the living area. The couch was beautiful. It was also far too short for someone over 6 feet tall. You'd wake up unable to move. I've survived worse. You don't have to. He hesitated. So you're all right with sharing? I trust you. The words escaped before I considered them. His expression changed almost. Imperceptibly. Not surprise. Something quieter. Something grateful. I won't make that a mistake, he replied. The afternoon passed unpacking, wandering through the resort gardens, and learning everyone's names. Every guest greeted us as though we had been together forever. No one questioned us. No one doubted us. By sunset, even introducing myself as Liam's boyfriend began to feel strangely natural. That evening, a welcome reception gathered guests beneath lanterns overlooking the cliffs. Soft music drifted through the ocean breeze, while conversations blended with distant waves below. Daniel, the groom, approached us carrying 2 glasses of champagne. Liam, the warmth in his voice carried years of shared history. It's good to see you. You too. There wasn't a trace of bitterness between them. Only respect. Daniel turned toward me. So you're Ethan. I've heard wonderful things. I smiled politely. Congratulations. Thank you. His gaze moved between Liam and me before settling into a gentle smile. I'm glad he didn't come here alone. For just a heartbeat, I noticed something cross Liam's face. Not jealousy. Not regret. Relief. As the evening slowly unfolded beneath the fading sky, I began to understand something unexpected. Maybe Liam hadn't asked me to become his fake boyfriend because he wanted revenge. Maybe he'd simply needed someone beside him while closing the final page of a chapter he had never truly finished. Some people believe love begins with a kiss. Mine began with a conversation beneath a sky that looked too beautiful to belong to people carrying unfinished hearts. The wedding ceremony wasn't until the following afternoon, leaving everyone free to wander the resort and enjoy the coastline. Liam suggested a walk after breakfast. We followed a narrow stone path winding between flowering shrubs and windswept dunes until the sounds of the reception faded behind us. Ahead, the Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath a cloudless sky, its waves rolling against the cliffs with patient certainty. For several minutes, neither of us spoke. The silence no longer felt awkward. It felt shared. "I used to come here with Daniel," Liam admitted quietly. His voice blended naturally with the rhythm of the ocean. I turned toward him, but didn't interrupt. "We came every summer for almost 5 years. He smiled faintly, though it never quite reached his eyes. "I thought we'd eventually get married somewhere along this coast." "What happened?" He watched another wave break against the rocks below. "I kept believing there would always be more time." The words landed more heavily than I expected. My career was growing. Every project felt urgent. Every deadline seemed important. He slipped both hands into his pockets. "I missed birthdays." He paused. "Anniversaries." Another breath. "Ordinary evenings that should have mattered." I understood without needing the ending. "Eventually he stopped asking you to choose." Liam nodded once. He deserved someone who was already present. The honesty in his voice carried no resentment. Only acceptance. "I don't blame him. You still loved him." "I did." He looked toward the horizon before adding softly, "But loving someone isn't always enough to keep them." We continued walking until we reached an overlook where wooden benches faced the sea. A cool breeze carried the scent of salt and cedar. I sat beside him. "Do you regret coming?" He considered the question. "No, you don't. If I hadn't come, I'd still be running away from a chapter that ended years ago." His expression softened. "And I wouldn't have asked you to come." Something inside my chest tightened. "I'm glad you asked." Our eyes met for only a second before both of us looked away. Later that afternoon, preparations transformed the lawn overlooking the cliffs into an elegant ceremony space. White chairs stood in perfect rows beneath flowing fabric tied to a floral arch, while musicians quietly rehearsed nearby. Guests drifted between conversations, laughter rising with the ocean breeze. Someone called Liam's name. When we turned, Daniel approached wearing rolled-up sleeves, clearly helping finalize the ceremony. "I was hoping I'd find you." He smiled warmly. "I wanted to thank you for coming." Liam returned the smile. "I wouldn't have missed it." Daniel looked toward me. "And thank you for convincing him." I blinked. "I'm not sure I did much." "You did more than you realize." Daniel rested a hand briefly on Liam's shoulder. For the first time in a long while, he looks peaceful. His words lingered after he walked away. That evening, guests gathered for dinner beneath strings of glowing lights suspended between towering pines. Music floated gently through the air. Conversations blended into comfortable background noise. Halfway through the meal, the band invited couples onto the dance floor. Chris immediately pulled his wife to her feet. Others followed. Liam looked at me with an uncertain smile. "We probably should." "For appearances?" He hesitated. "Maybe." I accepted his offered hand. The music slowed as we stepped beneath the lights. His hand settled carefully at my waist. Mine rested against his shoulder. We moved cautiously at first, laughing whenever one of us missed the rhythm. Gradually, the nervousness disappeared. The world around us seemed to fade until all I noticed was the steady beat of the music and the calm expression on Liam's face. "You dance better than our fake story suggested," I teased. He chuckled. "Maybe I underestimated myself. Or maybe you underestimated us." The words escaped before I could stop them. Neither of us spoke. We simply continued moving together beneath the evening sky. When the song ended, applause echoed around the lawn. Without thinking, we remained standing exactly where we were. Only inches separated us now. Liam's gaze lingered on mine. For one impossible heartbeat, it felt as though the entire weekend had stopped pretending long before either of us had. The most dangerous moments in life are never the loud ones. They're the quiet seconds when your heart decides something before your mind has the chance to object. Sunday arrived wrapped in clear skies and a gentle ocean breeze. From our balcony, I watched the sunrise paint ribbons of gold across the Atlantic while the resort slowly awakened below. Staff members arranged white flowers beneath the ceremony. Arch musicians tuned their instruments. Guests wandered through the gardens carrying coffee and laughing about the celebration ahead. Everything looked peaceful. Inside me, nothing was. Liam stepped onto the balcony holding 2 steaming mugs. "I guessed you'd already be awake." I couldn't sleep. He handed one to me. Me neither. We stood beside one another without speaking, watching waves roll endlessly toward the shore. Eventually he smiled. Thank you. For what? For making this weekend easier than I expected. I looked down at the coffee, warming my hands. I'm not sure it's been easy. His quiet laugh carried more understanding than amusement. No, it hasn't. By late afternoon, every chair facing the ocean had been filled. The groom stood beneath the floral arch with his closest friends while soft piano music drifted through the salty air. Daniel looked genuinely happy. Watching him, I finally understood why Liam held no bitterness. Some endings deserved gratitude instead of regret. When the ceremony began, Liam gently reached for my hand. Not dramatically, not for anyone else's benefit, just naturally. Our fingers intertwined, and somehow that simple gesture calmed the restless thoughts that had followed me all morning. The vows were sincere. The promises felt timeless. When Daniel and his husband shared their first kiss as newlyweds, applause rose across the cliffside. I clapped with everyone else, yet my attention wandered beside me. Liam wasn't watching the couple anymore. He was watching the ocean. His expression looked peaceful, free. As guests made their way toward the reception lawn, Daniel briefly approached us. I'm glad you came. Liam embraced him warmly. So am I. There were no lingering questions. No unfinished conversations. Only two people wishing each other happiness. The reception overflowed with music, conversation, and celebration as evening settled across the coastline. String lights shimmered overhead, while servers moved between tables carrying elegant dinners and glasses of champagne. Chris raised a toast that filled the lawn with laughter. Families danced. Friends reunited. For the first time all weekend, I stopped thinking about pretending. I simply enjoyed being beside Liam. Later, the band invited everyone onto the dance floor once again. Liam looked toward me. Would you? I didn't answer with words. I simply placed my hand in his. The music unfolded slowly around us. This time, dancing felt effortless. We no longer counted steps. We simply moved together beneath the lights while conversations faded into the distance. You know, Liam said softly, you're making this fake relationship surprisingly convincing. I smiled. Maybe because I'm starting to forget it's fake. The sentence escaped before I realized what I'd admitted. Our footsteps slowed. Neither of us looked away. His eyes searched mine with an honesty that made breathing unexpectedly difficult. Ethan. He spoke my name almost like a question. Without thinking, I stepped slightly closer. Only inches separated us. The world beyond the dance floor disappeared beneath music and distant waves. For one impossible moment, it felt inevitable. Liam slowly lifted one hand, gently brushing his thumb across my cheek. His touch was careful, almost hesitant, as though asking permission without words. I didn't move. Neither did he. Our faces drifted closer. Close enough that I could hear his breathing. Close enough that every sensible reason to stop dissolved beneath something neither of us could explain. Then a familiar voice shattered the silence. Liam. We turned immediately. Standing only a few feet away was Mason, my older brother. His expression shifted from surprise to complete confusion as his eyes moved from Liam to me, then back again. No one spoke. The music continued. The celebration carried on around us. But inside that single frozen moment, I realized our carefully constructed story had just collided with the one person neither of us had ever planned to deceive. Sometimes losing someone doesn't begin with goodbye. It begins when you decide they deserve a life without the complications you bring. The music continued long after Mason found us. Around us, people laughed, glasses clinked together, and the celebration carried on as though nothing unusual had happened. Only our small corner of the dance floor had fallen completely silent. Mason looked from me to Liam, his expression caught somewhere between confusion and disbelief. Ethan, his voice was calm. That somehow made everything worse. I didn't know you were coming. I didn't either, Mason replied. My conference ended early. Daniel insisted I drive over for the reception. He managed a faint smile before looking back at our joined hands. So, neither of us answered immediately. Liam released my hand first. The movement felt far heavier than it should have. I can explain, he said quietly. I'd appreciate that. We stepped away from the music toward a quiet terrace overlooking the ocean. The evening breeze carried the distant sound of waves crashing against the cliffs below. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Finally, Liam told him everything. The invitation, the fake relationship, the weekend. He didn't leave out a single detail. When he finished, Mason folded his arms and stared toward the dark water. I should probably be angry. I lowered my eyes. You have every right. Instead, Mason sighed. I'm mostly surprised neither of you called me. Liam nodded. I didn't want to put you in the middle. You already did. His words weren't harsh, only honest. Then he turned toward me. Ethan. I forced myself to meet his eyes. Did he pressure you into this? No. Did you want to come? Yes. The answer arrived without hesitation. Mason noticed. So this wasn't only about helping him. Neither Liam nor I spoke. Silence answered for us. A slow understanding crossed my brother's face. He looked at Liam, then at me. Finally he smiled, though sadness lingered behind it. I've known Liam for more than 15 years. He laughed softly. I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. My heartbeat stumbled. Mason rested a hand on Liam's shoulder. Just promise me one thing. Anything. If this stops being pretend. He glanced toward me. Don't waste each other's time. Before either of us could respond, he quietly returned to the reception, leaving only the two of us beneath the stars. Neither of us moved. I never wanted him to find out like that, Liam admitted. I know. Another silence settled between us. This one felt painfully different. I think we should end this. I looked up so quickly I almost forgot to breathe. What? The arrangement. The wedding is over. I know. His gray eyes reflected the distant lights from the celebration. It should stay over. I stared at him, unable to understand. Did I do something wrong? No. You don't have to protect my feelings. I'm not. His voice remained gentle. That's exactly what I'm doing. The realization struck with quiet force. He believed walking away was kindness. Liam, you have your whole future ahead of you. So do you. He shook his head. Our lives are different. That doesn't matter. It does to me. His words carried no anger, only fear. I spent years choosing work over the people I loved. He swallowed carefully. I'm not risking hurting you because I finally figured out what I should have learned a decade ago. You don't get to decide what's best for me. No. A fragile smile crossed his face. But I can decide what kind of man I want to be. My chest tightened. I don't want this weekend to become something that keeps you from finding the life you're supposed to have. I stepped closer. What if you're part of that life? His expression almost broke. For one impossible second, I thought he might reach for me again. Instead, he took one slow step backward. I'll always be grateful you came. The distance between us suddenly felt far greater than a single pace. The celebration behind us slowly faded into the night. By sunrise, we packed the suite in near silence. The drive back to Boston passed with polite conversation about traffic, weather, and work. Everything except the one subject that mattered. When Liam finally stopped outside my apartment, neither of us moved to open the doors. This is goodbye, he whispered. I wanted to tell him goodbye wasn't what either of us wanted. Instead, I watched him drive away. Only after the vintage Range Rover disappeared beyond the corner did I understand the truth. The weekend had ended. The pretending had ended. But whatever had quietly grown between us refused to disappear with either of them. You don't measure heartbreak by the days that pass. You measure it by how many ordinary moments still belong to someone who is no longer there. 3 months slipped by with quiet determination. Autumn slowly replaced the warmth of summer, covering Boston in shades of amber and crimson. My mornings filled with architectural drawings, client meetings, and construction visits. My evenings disappeared beneath stacks of blueprints spread across my dining table. From the outside, life looked exactly as it should. Inside, everything remained unfinished. Liam never called. He never texted. He kept the promise he had never actually spoken aloud. Distance. At first, I convinced myself it was temporary. Then I stopped checking my phone every few minutes. Eventually, I stopped expecting his name to appear at all. That hurt even more. One Friday afternoon, Mason invited me to dinner. Neither of us mentioned the wedding until dessert arrived. He leaned back in his chair, studying me with the same patient expression he had worn since we were kids. You're working too much. I've been busy. That's not what I said. I smiled weakly. You always could tell. I've known you your whole life. He paused before adding quietly, have you heard from Liam? I shook my head. No. He hasn't called me much either. That surprised me. I thought you two talked every week. We used to. The answer lingered between us. You miss him. It wasn't a question. I looked down at my untouched coffee. Every day. Mason didn't seem shocked. Instead, he nodded as though he had expected those exact words. You know, he said, he's not avoiding you because he stopped caring. Then why? Because caring is exactly the problem. I frowned. He thinks walking away protects you. He never asked whether I wanted protecting. I told him the same thing. For the first time in months, hope quietly stirred beneath the sadness. If you both keep making decisions for each other, Mason continued, you'll spend years missing something neither of you was willing to fight for. His words stayed with me long after dinner ended. The following week, my firm assigned me to present a renovation proposal for a historic waterfront hotel. When I arrived, I discovered another design company had been invited to collaborate on the interior spaces. Their presentation began before ours. I barely looked toward the front of the conference room until I recognized a familiar voice. Ladies and gentlemen. Every muscle in my body froze. Liam. He stood beneath the projector lights wearing a navy blazer, confidently explaining design concepts to the room. Professional. Composed. Exactly as everyone expected him to be. Only I noticed the brief hesitation when his eyes found mine across the conference table. For the smallest fraction of a second, neither of us heard another word. Then he continued speaking as though nothing had happened. The meeting lasted nearly 2 hours. We exchanged only professional comments. No personal questions. No private conversation. When everyone finally gathered their materials, I assumed he would leave with the rest of his team. Instead, I found him standing alone outside the building overlooking Boston Harbor. Cold wind carried fallen leaves across the pavement. I didn't know you'd be here, he said without turning around. I didn't either. Silence settled comfortably despite everything. You look well. So do you. We're both lying. A quiet laugh escaped both of us. It was the first genuine laugh I had heard from him since the wedding. I've missed talking to you, I admitted. His shoulders lowered slightly. I know. No. I stepped beside him, looking out across the water. I don't think you do. He finally faced me. The sadness in his gray eyes was impossible to hide. I thought staying away would make things easier. Did it? He answered almost immediately. Not for a single day. The confession hung between us, fragile and honest. For the first time since he had driven away from my apartment, I realized the loneliness hadn't belonged to only one of us. We had been living the same heartbreak, just from opposite sides of the silence. The hardest distance to cross isn't measured in miles. It's measured in the pride that keeps two people waiting for the other to take the first step. For several days after our unexpected meeting at the waterfront hotel, neither Liam nor I reached out. The conversation outside the conference room had reopened every feeling we had spent months trying to bury, yet neither of us knew what to do with the truth now that it had finally been spoken aloud. Life continued. At least it pretended to. I threw myself into work, accepting every project my firm offered. Long evenings became easier than returning to an apartment filled with silence. Every completed blueprint distracted me for a few hours, but never long enough to erase the memory of Liam's voice admitting he had missed me every single day. One rainy Wednesday evening, Mason knocked on my apartment door, carrying 2 paper bags from my favorite burger place. I figured you forgot dinner again. I was about to order. You've been about to order for 3 hours. I laughed and let him inside. We ate by the living room window while rain streaked across the glass. Halfway through the meal, Mason set down his drink. Liam called me yesterday. My heart reacted before my expression could. He did. He asked whether I thought you hated him. I stared at my brother in disbelief. Hate him? I told him that was probably the least accurate word he could have chosen. I couldn't help smiling. What else did he say? Mason looked out at the rain before answering. He said walking away felt like the responsible choice. And I asked him whether responsibility had made either of you happy. The room grew quiet. He didn't answer. Because he couldn't. Mason nodded slowly. Neither of you stopped loving each other. The sentence landed with surprising gentleness. I don't even know if he loves me. My brother gave me a look that bordered on amused. Ethan. What? The man disappeared for months because he thought staying would hurt you. He shook his head. People don't make mistakes that foolish unless they're in love. For the first time since the wedding weekend, hope felt stronger than fear. 2 nights later, our firm hosted a charity gala celebrating the completion of the historic waterfront renovation. Architects, artists, clients, and local business owners filled the restored ballroom beneath towering glass ceilings, and warm golden lights. I spent the first hour speaking with guests, trying to focus on conversations that barely registered. Then the entrance doors opened. Liam walked inside. He wasn't surrounded by colleagues this time. He wasn't presenting another project. He had come alone. When our eyes met across the crowded hall, everything else seemed to disappear. He crossed the room slowly, as though giving me every opportunity to walk away if I wanted. I stayed exactly where I was. When he finally stopped in front of me, neither of us spoke immediately. He looked different, not because of the tailored navy suit or the familiar confidence people always noticed first. He looked lighter, as though deciding to come here had already lifted a burden he had been carrying for far too long. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "You already gave me one. It wasn't enough. I waited. I thought loving you meant leaving." His voice remained calm despite the emotion beneath every word. "I finally realized loving someone also means trusting them to choose." A slow breath escaped me. "I would have chosen you. I know that now." He reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and removed a folded envelope. "I wrote this 3 different times." He smiled awkwardly, then decided saying it myself was less frightening. He placed the unopened letter in my hand anyway, in case I forget something. I looked at the envelope before returning my attention to him. "You really thought I'd read this instead of listening to you?" A quiet laugh escaped both of us. The sound felt wonderfully familiar. Then Liam took one careful step closer. Not close enough to assume, only close enough to hope. "For the first time in my life," he whispered, "I'm done pretending." And standing beneath the lights of the ballroom where strangers celebrated another successful project, I realized the next words either of us spoke would decide the rest of our lives. The greatest love stories are never remembered because 2 people met. They are remembered because, after every reason to walk away, they finally chose to stay. I looked at the unopened letter resting in my hand. Then I smiled. "I don't need this." Liam blinked. "You don't." I carefully placed the envelope back into the inside pocket of his jacket. "If we're finally telling each other the truth, I'd rather hear your voice." For a long moment, he simply looked at me. Then he laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that carried relief instead of amusement. "I love you, Ethan." There was no hesitation, no uncertainty, no fear hiding behind carefully chosen words. "I've loved you longer than I allowed myself to admit." His eyes never left mine. "I convinced myself you deserved someone closer to your own age. Someone whose life wasn't already complicated. Someone who hadn't spent years making mistakes." He shook his head gently. "I thought leaving was the generous thing to do. It wasn't." "I know." I stepped closer until only a breath separated us. "You never gave me the chance to choose. I'm giving you that chance now. You already know my answer." A hopeful smile slowly appeared across his face. "I want the real relationship." "So do I." Nothing about the moment felt dramatic. There were no fireworks, no audience gathering around us. Only 2 ordinary people finally saying everything they should have said months earlier. Liam reached for my hand. This time there was no pretending, no invented story, no fictional history, only truth. He leaned forward carefully, giving me every opportunity to pull away if I wanted. Instead, I closed the remaining distance. Our first kiss was gentle, unhurried. It wasn't fueled by excitement or uncertainty. It felt like arriving somewhere both of us had been trying to reach for a very long time. When we finally separated, I noticed soft applause behind us. Chris stood near one of the ballroom entrances beside his wife, both of them smiling. Mason leaned against a nearby column with folded arms and an expression that mixed satisfaction with playful disbelief. "Took you long enough," he called. I laughed. "So you were watching?" "For the last 5 minutes." Liam rubbed the back of his neck. "That's slightly embarrassing." "No," Mason replied warmly. "It was worth waiting for." Several months later, spring returned to Boston. Life looked remarkably ordinary, which somehow made it extraordinary. My architectural projects continued growing. Liam's design studio expanded into a larger office overlooking the harbor. Whenever possible, we worked together on the same developments, discovering that our professional styles complemented each other as naturally as our conversations always had. Weekends became our favorite tradition. Sometimes we explored small coastal towns. Sometimes we stayed home cooking dinner while arguing over music neither of us actually disliked. Sometimes we simply sat on the apartment balcony watching the city lights appear one window at a time. There was nothing spectacular about those evenings. They became my favorite memories anyway. One Saturday morning, nearly a year after Daniel's wedding, Liam parked the same dark green Range Rover outside my apartment building. Only this time, we weren't leaving for someone else's celebration. We were visiting the coastline simply because we wanted to. When we reached the overlook where he had once confessed the regrets of his past, he stopped walking. "I've been thinking," he said. "That usually means something important." He smiled before reaching into his jacket pocket, the same pocket that had once carried an unopened letter. This time he removed a small velvet box. "Ethan Carter." His voice remained calm despite the emotion shining through his eyes. "You helped me believe that love isn't about finding the perfect moment." He opened the box. "It's about choosing the same person every ordinary day afterward." Inside rested a simple platinum ring. "Will you keep choosing me?" I didn't answer immediately. Not because I needed time, because I wanted to remember every second exactly as it happened. Then I smiled through happy tears and nodded. "Always." As the ocean rolled endlessly against the cliffs below, I realized the greatest truth of our story. He had once asked me to pretend to be his boyfriend for a single weekend. Instead, he became the man I wanted beside me for the rest of my life. And that was the only ending either of us would ever need.